Are you unable to concentrate on the tasks at hand? Do you need help focusing more or leveling up your game? Here's a tip. Try Cognizant Citicoline, clinically studied to support mental energy, focus, memory, and attention. Cognizant supports brain health and supplies the brain with the energy it needs to stay sharp. Cognizant is a leading nootropic, featured in over 200 products. This podcast is powered by Cognizant. Visit cognizant.com to learn more and find a product to help you fuel your day.
Ready to achieve great heights? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Power Your Performance, the podcast where we dive deep with leaders in the gaming world and beyond and learn the techniques they use to power their lives. I am your host, Gary Kleinman.
So Power Your Performance welcomes with wholeheartedly excitement Wim Stocks. How are you?
Hi, Gary. Very nice to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Who knows where it's going to go?
It'll go someplace good in health, wellness, and gaming, brought to us by the wonderful people at Cognizant. So if anybody that I have seen in gaming has a long history of lots of different skill sets, capabilities, and vision, it's you. And it's just a pleasure to have somebody with that arc of experience here with us. So tell me, did you grow up being a gamer?
It's a funny, I've had to reflect on this because how this all, it seemed so random in its occurrence and sort of the staging of my career. But there, as I think back on it, reflected on it a lot, obviously. First of all, I've been doing this a long time in my 30 plus years of being in the gaming business. When I started in the gaming business, it was really a garage business, and it is just quite the opposite of that these days, and really fun to have seen it grow, mature. I use the word mature, but it still is far from mature. There's so much excitement and going and sort of permutations and evolution that no one, safe to say, no one saw happening in sort of the monumental way it is happening. But I grew up in a gaming household. My dad, and this is I think the start of it all. We played a lot, even very young age. 4 or 5, played board games all the time. But my dad, when I was 7, bought a pinball machine and put. Hopefully, everybody knows what a pinball machine is. Probably a lot of people who don't. But in the early days, to me, pinball was a video game, and although I didn't really fully know what a video game was at that point, but by the time my dad brought this thing home, bells, lights, whistles, a little round silver ball that you could direct around, I was instantly hooked on it. And by the time I was 8, I could take the pinball machine apart and put it back together again.
Wow!
It was always falling into disrepair, these old electromagnetic fields, always something going wrong. And so I first of all, we got very close to a pinball wholesaler who was able to sell us parts, but we were repairing a thing all the time. And I've had a lot of conversations about gaming, and that really is the thing that got me sort of hooked on gaming, although at that point I never ever thought there were things like jobs in gaming. I had no idea that you certainly that there was a job in gaming, let alone having a career in gaming. So,
well, before you go any further, and since I love pinball and I grew up playing it, and whenever I see one, I'm afraid to start because I never have enough quarters or time. Your favorite pinball, when you look back, what is the game that stands out?
Well, there was a game. It was a game called, and it was a Williams game. I know that I will go to my grave braving the play of a Gottlieb machine or a Williams machine. Right. The new ones today, in my mind, you certainly get the pinball experience, but they're nothing like Gottlieb in its prime was probably one of the greatest machines that were built. But there was a game called Kill All Surfers, and it was a Williams game. The whole premise of it was, the knockdowns in a pinball machine was to knock down all the surfers, and it was I think it wasn't necessarily the most playable, but I love the notion of killing all surfers. So some of the newer games are pretty good. What's the monster game or Martian game? Going to forget the name of it, but that's a pretty good one too. But I will go to my grave remembering Kill All Surfers and the Williams machine. Great. And your point about quarters. I used to steal quarters out of my mother's knitting purse to sneak to the bowling alley to play. So
didn't we all?
Yeah, we did.
We'll get off pinballs in a second, but there is a pinball museum in Las Vegas, and
I've not been yet. I got
to tell you, it is, and everything is playable. So it's all there, and they're all available for play. And every game that you have ever wanted to play is there. The other place to go is the Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. If you can get somebody to show you the basement, they've got the pinball machines all in working order, made out of wood, and go back to the old pinball machines. Where you can hit the ball up into the bleachers, and you've got the baseball counter.
Yeah. Love that. Love
those are all there, and I can talk about that forever because I spent so much time in an arcade in high school and then college, which explains probably my grades in college. But that's again a different story for a different day. So you graduate from pinball to somewhere into the video game world. Were you surprised that there was even jobs available, because you've got this long history?
When I was a math major in college, and wasn't sure what to do with it. I started postgraduate as going in engineering school. Said, man, what am I doing? This isn't for me, and didn't even make it through the first quarter of graduate school. But coding, coding a computer was part of the curriculum to become a math major, and I stunk at it. But I did. It did show me that we could make these very rudimentary games on computers, and all Fortran based, and loading cards into card readers to make essentially to do the programming in the computer, and that. It certainly didn't. The light bulb didn't go off at that point, but there was something there, and it got me more interested in computing. And this is I was graduating from college in late '70s, and personal computers didn't really exist at that point. But nonetheless, did that whole Fortraning programming that we did got me kind of interested in the fact that there could be electronic versions of games that are playable. So after I graduated from college, went to work for AT&T, got involved in selling computers. These are Unix-based computers. But again, all the more close now to sort of the electronic computing platforms that would be obviously those that propelled gaming. And I, after I went to work for AT&T, I was getting a little bored with the big corporate environment. I went to work for a software distribution company. It's probably the best way to say it. And it was music software, so music CDs, video VHS was just getting started in those days, and also was mass market computer software. This is the likelihood you might, Gary. I don't think you're quite my era, but Egghead and Computerland, these were the retailers selling consumer computer software. And at that point, the Targets, the Walmarts, the Best Buys of the world, while they were around, they were not selling computer software. So very specialty, and started to get involved in distributing these new computer games. They were on floppy disk. That you may remember the word trippy, which meant there was a Commodore, there was an Apple, and there was an IBM PC version of the game in one box. That was a trippy, or flippy was Apple and Apple II and PC iteration of a game. And those were Sierra Online, in the early days, Gabriel Knights, those games, multiple, you had to, in order to program them and load them into your computer, you'd load in multiple disks at a time. And it was that really, to me, sort of illuminated what gaming could be and what it was all about. A lot of storytelling in those days. Roberta Davis, still one of the greatest software story writers that ever existed, and she was the brains behind a lot of the Sierra Online, especially Gabriel Knight's line. So I got addicted to those. Enter Atari, enter Nintendo. This is now, mid 80s, and all positioned as toys, but nonetheless, as really the premise of gaming, the foundation of gaming in the U.S. And then fully engaged in software as a business. In the late 80s, through this distribution company, we ended up starting a division purely around entertainment software. There was some music software. People may remember CD Plus, and Enhanced CD, where a CD would not only contain the music content, it also contained multimedia content. Yeah. We were very big in the distribution around that. There was some gaming on that, but it was really the 90s as the first PlayStation gets released, Nintendo 64 or Nintendo first NES and SNES were out at that point, and that's really through the distribution side became involved in publisher. The first publisher I went to work for was GT Interactive, very seminal publisher / distributor of PC video games in the United States. This is we distributed and published Doom, Quake, Duke Nukem, Unreal. Epic was our partner back in those days. We published all the Unreal Tournament, and we really cornered the market as a publisher on first-person shooters, and those were huge titles in those days, all PC based. Not long after, got involved in the console scene. So those were really my formative days in gaming, and all from the publishing perspective. Never a developer, even though I had this really I'm not a very good coding background, but had the exposure at least to start through coding but always on the business side, sales, marketing, licensing, distribution, and it's carried me through to the point I am today. The big pivot for me, I think one of the things you could say about me, I was always looking for what was going to happen next, what was the next big thing. Digital, when we were a publisher in the late 90s, early 2000s, all games were still distributed on hard copy, sold in Best Buys and Walmarts and Targets and GameStops. But we as a company, and this is now GT Interactive, got involved early in digital distribution, and I pushed a lot of that for our company, and it wasn't rocket science. Watching the music business go all digital, watching the video business go all digital, watching the book business go all digital. It was the only thing that kept gaming back was that the files were so large, the bandwidth sort of had to catch up to it. So,
but from the company's perspective, then was it still kind of viewed as a niche business? I mean, large.
Oh yeah,
but very niche, which is so different than it is today. Is that right. It might be lots of niches put together, but then it was really a kind of a finite niche.
Well, and what even inhibited it is that here we are, a big publisher, and we have these big retail customers who initially didn't quite see there was any threat, but after watching the music businesses go and the book business go and the video business started to go, say, wait a minute, you guys get into digital distribution, you're going to lose our support for your products in our retail channels, and they were heavy-handed. They can be heavy-handed, especially the likes of Walmart and Target and Best Buy and GameStop. So we had to tread very lightly, and all publishers treaded lightly because they couldn't lose the volume associated with these retail sales. So in any event, we pushed the envelope. We did things with sub licenses. We did things with sub licenses that weren't necessarily the the top, or the IP that was at the top of our supply chain, but nonetheless were ways for us to navigate through and learn about how digital distribution would come into play and come into being, and so did a lot of that experimentation, and through I give all my bosses in the time a ton of credit for giving me the leash and the noose to hang myself, but we learned a lot, and of course now finding a game, even at GameStop, is hard to do because consumers now are obviously downloading and doing either streaming or downloading a game or playing digitally in some form or fashion. So that was a big moment, and but slowly but surely, took the we have the music business to thank really for making all the mistakes and helping us understand what the right way to engage with the consumer digitally was to be, and again, we took really good advantage of all the other forces in the marketplace at the time that were trying these things, and ultimately we came out okay. So all good in that regard. The publishing business was sort of losing interest for me in the mid 2000s as our business. We were at that point, GT Interactive had been merged with a company called Infogram. Infogram was a European-based publisher and distributor. GT was a U.S.-based distributor and publisher, North American-based really. And we merged with that company. It made all sense in the world, very complementary in every way. And then we also made a really important purchase of Hasbro. Was sold off their interactive division. We bought it. That all got merged together. And in the IP of Hasbro, some most amazing game IP on the planet, but buried in their IP list as we were doing due diligence, here's the Atari brand. And none of us knew that Hasbro owned the Atari brand at the time we were buying Hasbro Interactive. So we got that as part of the acquisition. It was really a license. It was going to be a 20-year license. 15-year license for anything Atari. Hasbro was still going to be the master licensor, but we were able to leverage a lot of the Atari IP in both a retro way, but also reinvented ways, mobile, all these other digital platforms, and in combination with a great footprint, but global footprint for sales and distribution. It became a really strong, big entity and company. But as that was waning, I wanted to do more digitally. That's the rest of the world was still kind of hung up on retail. I formed my own company called Elephant Entertainment. We were all things digital, from casual games, downloadable games, to massively multiplayer online games. We did a lot of relicensing for Korean MMOs, bringing them over, localizing them. That was in the 2006 to 2008 era, and at the end of that, you might remember, we lived through 2008. It was a disaster year. Markets were falling apart. Real estate falling apart. All the banks were crashing, and that was the time we were out trying to raise money for our new company. And we ended up selling to a major publisher, THQ, who had no digital strategy whatsoever. They bought our company to help them get involved in digital, not only learning for the mass market for digital games, casual games, downloadable games, mobile games, but also getting more involved in MMOs. And I lasted there for 2 of the 3 years of my contract. I ended up buying myself out of my final year and got involved with a small little startup. 2 young guys had a great vision for competitive gaming and for playing games competitively online. This is now all portending esports, but at the time that word didn't exist. This is in the 2009 timeframe. Had a great idea, great platform that enabled head-to-head play for money. A lot of misunderstanding about what that was. Everyone thought it was gambling, but in those days, now very commonly referred to and referenced as skill-based gaming. At the time, it was a sort of very much a subset and fell into the definition of gambling. But if you stayed as a head-to-head match with no third party betting on the outcome, that is perfectly legal as long as it's a game of skill. And we had to educate every publisher about it. We sat with the NFL, we sat with the NBA, we sat with the FIFA organization to talk about this platform. All of our games were at that time we were really sports sim focused, and Madden was the first game that we had, and we did it all illegally, or I should say, without permission. Without permission, and how we viewed this is that when you get a cease and desist, that's a good thing because now you're in a conversation.
Right. Well, somebody saw you, but was that really the first time that there was this head-to-head competition for pricing, essentially?
Well, it was one of the very early. Now, at the same time, we are building our company. It started as World Gaming, but those who are remembering this story will know that we entered the market as Virgin Gaming, and Richard Branson heard about what we were doing through Virgin Mobile in Canada, and loved the fact that we were, as you know, the Virgin brand affiliates with traditional businesses, but traditional businesses that have turned the model on its head in some form or fashion. This was the first time that a online platform had been enabled for online play for cash. MLG was being built at the same time. They were doing more things with virtual currency than they were with real currency. We were hard dollars. We got set up with PayPal, which was also really interesting because they weren't setting up gambling companies, and the fact that they acknowledged us as a legit business, not gambling related, really also put the illumination on what we were doing. But I can't say we were the first, Gary, but we were certainly.
Well, you're certainly early, acknowledging the competitive aspect in a formalized way.
That's right, and that had some money involved, that had an outcome involved for prizing. But that was really after we launched our company. Again, I'm passing through the Branson story, but he wanted to own the company. We said if it wasn't for sale, we were still planning on going into market as World Gaming, but he said, I'll give you the Virgin name if you go into market as Virgin Gaming, and give me a favorable evaluation on my investment, which we agreed to do. It actually was a very reasonable thing after going through some rather heavy negotiation with his biz guys. But once he stepped in, it was an easy process. We launched in 2010 as Virgin Gaming at E3. We had a great turnout. We were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Gambling comes to video gaming, even though we weren't gambling. Again, part of the educational process, and really our very first deal we did was with EA, and EA actually used our platform tech in Madden 2011, in FIFA 2011, and in NHL 2011. So in these sports sims games, we had our tech, and which is monumental for us, because the minute somebody logged into the game, they could drop down to the play menu and see a Virgin Gaming lobby. And once in the lobby, they registered automatically for play on our platform, and could play for a $10 match, $5 match. And those for us, that was lights out. That the very first night our FIFA lobby lit up, we had over 700,000 registrations.
That's crazy.
Which we weren't ready for. So, but our first deal, and this is to this day, we take credit with making him CFO or CEO of EA. Andrew Wilson did our deal. He was the head of, who's now the CEO of EA. He was at the time head of global game development, and all of this sort of integration and modernization, the result of which was in his jurisdiction. We had 2 meetings with him, and he said, "We're going to do this," and to this day put EA on the map, and certainly put us on the map. And now, of course, Andrew Wilson's CEO. I'm only being facetious. That's not the reason we are not the reason he's CEO, but I kid him about it all the time and make sure
But you're part of the reason.
But part of
Right.
So that was my entree into esports. And again, the word esports didn't exist. We went on to strike deals with many publishers around the same kind of dynamic, and then we were invested in, let's put it this way, by Cineplex. This was in 2013. A lot of the early investors, were Canadian, and Cineplex being a Canadian company, we were very well networked. They watched what we were doing. They were in the throes of diversifying movie theaters, trying to think of new ways to light up movie theaters, how to utilize them, how to bring them into a more contemporary experience. And gaming was a big thing that they focused on. Esports as a live activation, very, very theaters could work very well in that regard. So what started as a sort of a small investment, 3 years later, in 2017, they bought most of the company, and we got all involved in terms of building our platform. We bought a collegiate esports, fledgling little collegiate esports organization called Collegiate Star League, CSL for short. That young man started a league on the west coast of the United States, playing StarCraft between colleges, no different than like a Pac-12 playing football.
Right.
He built this conference to play StarCraft 2, and when we took it over, I think there were 35 schools. When we sold it in 2020, there were 1,800 schools involved. There were 10 different leagues. Every league had multiple divisions, like a Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. We started a women's league. So that was also just a lot of fun. And today in Scholastic Esports, there isn't a college that doesn't have an esports program. It doesn't have a gaming curriculum. It's now schools are now building facilities so they can recruit some of the best.
Yeah. No question. And they're giving academic scholarships and everything else, which is fantastic. But go back. So, what made you look at the collegiate area and think it was so robust at the beginning before the explosion?
Well, it made perfect sense that this is a demographic that is core to video gaming, and especially males in the 16 to 21 era. This is they're still in school. They have time to devote to video gaming, and we were tapping into the one thing about esports that really has helped understanding esports and traditional sports are very alike. The only thing that differs is that the game. While there's baseball, there's Call of Duty. While there's football, there is League of Legends. While there's basketball, there's Rocket League. I mean, the dynamics from amateur to semi-pro to pro, the structures, all of those things were at the time they didn't exist, but the more we structured things to look like dynamics that people understood, the more understanding we got, the more energy we got, and the more momentum we got. So we tried to. People called us the NCAA of esports, which we didn't like. We always thought of ourselves as the anti-NCAA of esports, but the analogy was a good one. That here's a structure that puts schools into conferences around a particular game, no different than a Pac-12 or an SEC or a Big Ten or a ACC. This is what we did with video gaming, and got the publishers on side to help us with this. Riot was one of our biggest partners up front. League of Legends now they have their own leagues running, but we were we got them on the ground floor, got them started, and moved their game League of Legends into now it's one of the elite esports, not just in the United States but around the world at the university or college level. So it was a this we had so many analogous kinds of dynamics in the marketplace that we simply converted or pivoted to for esports, and that's how we got so much momentum and so much involvement and support.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that the colleges did is that the auspices went under academics and not under sports and athletics, so that you didn't have to deal with the NCAA eligibility issues, so that they can win money and still get a scholarship, or they can play outside without violating any student athlete rules. And that's significant, I think, in terms of the growth, because had it been the NCAA before the name, image, and likeness cases that came aboard and changed that, there probably would have been a lot more restrictions had the NCAA, had their wallets into esports at that level.
You know, Gary, that the NCAA did look very seriously at esports and at a task force and hired agencies to look at it. And the year that early in 2018, it might have been late in 2017 or early in 2018, the NCAA said we are not going to be involved in esports. That's the end of that year, 2018. I got invited to speak about esports at Learfield's. You know who Learfield is? Learfield's the big MMR multimedia rights agency for all major colleges and universities, and they host a big event for all their athletic directors in New York every year. This was end of 2018. They invited me to be on stage with Mark Emmert, who was then the head of the NCAA, and talk about esports. And I think they expected some, big debates and heated debate to erupt. But we didn't really practice or barely, shook his hand before we got on stage. And the premise was, well, where does the NCAA stand for esports? And of course, Mark was articulate about why they weren't involved, and they expected me to sort of do a counter argument to that. And I actually agreed with them. I said, "You're right. You shouldn't be involved. There was supposed to be some big debate about it." And I said, esports is much broader as a result of not being confined to the athletic department. The athletic department is important. Obviously, it's got where the money is, where the benefactor support is, where all the programming and facility support are. But in a landscape of a university or college, esports is supported by a STEM program or a computer science program, right, or a student life program. In many cases, it's the business school that are supporting the program because of all the career. Just as there are careers in sports management, there's a direct corollary with every subset of a sports management degree as there is for an esports management degree. So we were all in on helping Scholastic. Still to this day, we are very involved, not just in college and high school, in my new realm at Vindex and Belong Gaming. Those are huge opportunities for more gamers to get involved and to do it under the auspices of not just participation, but also education. And we are very close with a couple of high school districts that have great vision about what gaming is, what esports are, how their students can be involved. I get emotional. We have a great partnership with a school district in Dallas. It's the Grapevine Colleyville Independent School District. And one of our arenas is right adjacent, right in the heart of what this gentleman's school district is. The guy's name is Kyle Berger. He's the CTO. He funded for 4 years. He funded this all on his own just to give kids who they're not athletes in the traditional sense, but they're computer science kids. They're gaming kids. They build their own computer kind of kids. And once he formed his esports program there's like 25,000 students in all the collective school district. 1,500 of them are involved in this esports program. And of those 1,500, 80% had never been involved in an extracurricular activity at the school level. So, think about accessibility and diversity and inclusivity.
Oh,
how that has broadened,
no question,
and brought more kids and given more kids purpose. And when I grew up, video gamers were labeled as losers, and they were antisocial, and they
Yes.
stayed in their basement, they ate Cheetos, and they weren't social, and I have so many stories about parents, as my kids were growing up, belittling me, berating me for ruining the youth of America. And
I've been accused of that, and as we all have in that conversation. But then, when you talk to the parents and you say, well, what's a video game? It's a story with conflict resolution, art, music, and every time you play it, it's different. As opposed to you read a book, it's a book. Not that you shouldn't read, but the story's the same. The characters don't morph. You have no control. Don't you want your child, because most of the time it's a parent saying it's the worst thing in the world and they're going to become violent kids as they grow up. And you say, but look at what they're learning. I mean, they're learning all the story, and they're learning conflict and resolution and character perspective and music and art. And you start talking about that. They go, I do want my child to do it. And then it seems that the conversation shifts to a balance of playing versus non-playing, and it's interesting. And you're actually a good person to ask this, and I've asked this to many people. What surprises me is the publishers don't really produce many PSAs to talk about the valuable attributes of gaming, that it is social, that you do learn story, that there is art, that 20% or something like that of city managers in the United States credit SimCity for that career, or the cathedral that burnt down that used, I believe it's Assassin's Creed, right? From the blueprint to rebuild. And I'm surprised that publishers, and you being on both sides of the fence, why haven't they taken the opportunity to put that message out?
Well, you may remember that I think every publisher does it in its own way. However, the ESA, Entertainment Software Association, has done a lot of work in that regard. The benefits, especially the sort of the physiological, psychological, emotional, mental development that games can bring. Nintendo did you might remember when Game Boy was popular. What was the name of the game? Brain. I forget the name, but they had many sequels of that, and it was targeted and really geared towards seniors who wanted to keep their minds agile and active, and was it called Brain Quest or something?
Yeah,
like
that? They've done some of that in creating IP for markets and saying, and there's a value proposition to all that, but as a fundamental message to the general public, I don't see them having a formalized message or platform about all the things that gaming does. And even when you hear the stories of the violence in gaming, and they blame some shooting or some attack, and that there never seems to be that same force from the industry, from the publishers, who have the most to gain, obviously, by doing that. And the parents that I've ever spoken to, wherever, they're at a loss. So when they hear some things like that, they go, "Oh my God, I guess the kids are social. They're not antisocial. It's different." And I can sit here, and I won't today give you, as you can, hordes of examples of how powerfully social it is, and in many respects, even more so than stick and ball sports.
Well, and think about, you're playing a game. This is a great story. I was citing from my past, and I still have PTSD about it. A woman who used to harangue me at our children's the Parent Teacher Association PTA meetings, and she knew the common knowledge that I was in the video game business. Her sons used to hang out at our house because we had all the gaming systems, and she would berate me about, "You're ruining my son. All he wants to do is sit in the basement. He's antisocial. He's got his headset on all day. He's talking to somebody. I don't know who he's talking to, but he's never going to be anything worthwhile." And this same woman, 2 years ago, was back in Minneapolis where I grew up and raised my kids. This woman, I saw her at a holiday party. She approached me. I was like trying to back out of the room as fast as I could when I saw her approaching. And she said, I used to harangue you about the detriment of video gaming that I felt my son was having. I said, I certainly remember. And he said, well, now I have a grandson who's really good at Fortnite. Can you help him become a pro? So I mean, if that doesn't tell you right then and there how gaming has changed perception and
it's remarkable. No, because I met somebody recently, they what do you do? And tell them in gaming and health and wellness and what have you. And they go, I'm never going to let my grandkids play because of it's violent and they're going to be violent. I looked at this person who's a relative contemporary. I said, well, didn't you play cowboys and Indians and cops and robbers? And the guy said, yes. I said, when was the last time you thought about robbing a bank because you played that, right? And he goes, well, no, of course I wouldn't. I said, well, this is all fantasy and story and what have you. And there's valuable, spatial awareness. There's strategy. There's all these things that they're learning if you can just look at it that way. And they go, yeah, well.
League of Legends has been described as chess, split-second chess. Yep. I mean, and you'd be thrilled if your son played chess and became good at it, just because it's so strategic and it brings your mind and resource management to the forefront. So you're right. You're right here.
I just think that they can do more to codify a message. But when you looked at like the college leagues, did you ever think about the health and wellness aspect of all the gamers? Are they the anxiety, the extended gaming sessions, and the chairs, as gorgeous as they are not overly ergonomic? Where's the focus and the attention and the brain fog and all the things, the carpal tunnel syndromes? Was that part of what you looked at, or is it just the organization and the gameplay?
We were more. I'll be very honest that wasn't a priority for us, although being in the context of a scholastic environment, we did balance was really important. The fact that not only to do this and to get the schools to be comfortable with allowing their students and their teams to participate in our leagues, we had to recognize the balance, that we couldn't encourage them to practice 8 hours a day and miss school. And we were really involved. We implemented a program where you no different than the NCAA. Here, another reference to a commonality with the NCAA, but you had to carry a grade point, passing grade point average and you had to prove that before you or as you were enrolling to play, that you were carrying a full load, number one, and number two is that you had passing grades. So that was our eligibility, aligned with the NCAA. Not to the degree, Gary, of what you're suggesting, and certainly not to the degree that of things that we're supporting now through both the Vindex and the Belong arenas, but we did start to acknowledge there has to be a balance. They're in the context of education, getting an education. Even the traditional sports have to honor that as well. We played by those rules and we implemented those rules. So then to the next level of emotional well-being and eating properly and resting properly and getting exercise to offset your sedentary life. Although most gamers would say they're very active, it's maybe not big muscle activity, but it's small muscle and mental activity.
Absolutely.
Unlike any other sport. So those were things that we embraced. We wanted to embrace. In that context was the well-being and the health of the gamer and balance for a gamer. So I guess you could say we started that, but certainly not to how evolved it is and how important it is today.
Right. And in the few minutes we have left, tell me about Belong. So you've gone from distribution, retail, wholesale, game development,
digital,
college leagues, and now Belong is really in the esports venue arena business, primarily.
Yeah.
And so what's that like for you
to go from, I mean, that's kind of going from wholesale to retail. Right?
Well, it's we definitely, most of, and as we started back to my World Gaming, Virgin Gaming, that was really all digital. We would culminate as live events when we had a big tournament or where we had a big event on some level. We would culminate as live events, but most of 90% of all the activations that we were accomplishing were online. Now with Belong Gaming, these are meant to be in real life venues. We use the word arena, but it's a bit of a misnomer. The arena word speaks to the competitive core of what we're doing, not the size. Think of arena as 20,000 seats sort of experiences.
Correct.
Think of AT&T in Dallas or whatever. But these aren't.
They're gaming centers. I mean, they're game centers, right?
And we would call them. We do call them community hubs. That we are on the ground in a neighborhood or in a city or in a market, and those venues are meant to attract and appeal to a very localized market. The great analogy is I grew up in Minnesota and played hockey growing up. There was a hockey rink within any 2 blocks in any direction of my house. I could go to the hockey rink, and when I wasn't skating, I was hanging out in the warming house. It became not only our competitive hockey, but it was also our social center. And that's essentially what these arenas are for us. They're community hubs for gaming. We are building a network of them. Today, we have 32 total arenas. There are 26 in the UK. We started our US rollout just a year ago. Our first anniversary was just last weekend of our first arena in the US was in Houston. And we just opened our 6th arena 2 months ago in Philadelphia. We have plans for a much bigger footprint through a couple of different models. But that is all about bringing gaming and esports. We're not all about, we use this word arena that sort of connotes competitiveness, but it's also we're very much social gaming. Our audiences, you said it best. Our audiences are gaming's not a hobby for them. This is a lifestyle. This is how they entertain themselves. This is how they socialize. This is how they're raising their families. Millennials and Gen Zs are having kids. There's kids are coming up as gamers, right out of the womb, and so that's the energy we're targeting. That's the energy we're tapping into. That's the energy we're generating, and doing it through these arenas. All high performance, best equipment on the planet. We have great partnerships with the likes of PlayStation and Xbox and all the game publishers. HP, the great PC manufacturer, is our partner on the PC side. High-end OMEN machines in our arenas, and really meant to bring people together around the great aspects of gaming. We give, if people are aspiring to improve, we give them all sorts of opportunities in programming, tournaments, cups, throwdowns, leaderboards to get involved if they want to be social. We give them community nights. We have a great group in Chicago. They're keyboard enthusiasts. They come in every week to talk about their keyboards and I mean, crazy stuff like that. But they're as enthusiastic as anybody around the equipment and the aspect of gaming. Through our arenas, we also have a curriculum that will be launched this fall called Belong Academy. We're actually starting with Epic. Epic has been a great partner for us. We're going to be teaching Fortnite Creative through Belong Academy in our arenas. That then also ties into and latches into Fortnite Competitive. So if you're not aware, Epic is a huge supporter of Scholastic initiatives because they have tool sets. Unreal Engine's a tool set that is not just a game development tool anymore. It's being used for car design, it's being used for fashion design, it's being used for house design. Fortnite Creative is a builder tool set. They have another tool set called Twinmotion. We will be teaching all of those courses and classwork through our Belong Academy initiative in the arenas. I mean, that's just getting started with what we're doing there. So again, it really these arenas being hubs for communities. good news is we're getting a lot of engagement and a lot of great support from people seeing what they're doing. Families coming in. It's proving to be a really great concept.
Which is fantastic. And I got one more question because I'm going to be respectful of our time. Is you've always been a quarter of a mile, if not a mile, ahead of what's coming. Right? I mean, I can sit here and listen to your story, and you were ahead of digital before digital really got it, and college before it got big, and now you're doing this. What's coming next?
Well, it's a great question. There's subsets that are already showing great signs. I talk about mobile gaming, but mobile gaming is already, it's just not big in North America. Mobile esports, I should say. It's coming to North America. It's huge in Asia already. Certainly, metaverse is interesting. We're doing a lot of that. People are so fascinated by the metaverse. Yet, if you're a gamer, you've been in the metaverse. You've been in most of the metaverse. Any experience, you're already there.
You're already there, right?
You might not have your VR goggle on yet. You might not.
But you've been there. That's the basis of it.
But it's fundamental. And so for us, it's really interesting, and it's great to see the rest of the world catching up and all these big brands coming in that will, and part of that energy is because of gaming. They're seeing the engagement that the metaverse can provide, and most of that engagement's coming through the gaming venues. How these gaming environments start to connect to one another. You're already seeing signs of that happening. So from cross-play, now that you can play a game on an Xbox and play somebody who's on a PlayStation, that's the start of where the metaverse is going. The avatars in Web3, you're seeing avatars that show up in one ecosystem, showing up in another ecosystem. It's all starting to happen. So that gets me very excited. And I think Web3 is still a lot of work to do there. But as we grew up, playing games, I can countless hundreds of hours playing World of Warcraft, put all that time and energy into building my avatar, my experience, my gold, my levels in World of Warcraft. I don't own any of that. Essentially, I'm renting it. But in Web3, all that time and energy and customization you're bringing for it, not only do you own it, you can resell it. You can do. There's a lot of work that needs to go on the models. Some of the early models showed a lot of promise, are not proving to be quite what we thought they were going to be. But nonetheless, that genie's out of the bottle, and there's going to be a lot more coming in that regard. So again, I'm sort of still shell shocked by how big gaming has become, and it's been fun to be able to see it and have maybe a small hand, but have a hand nonetheless in helping get us there. And it's been just couldn't have more. I should have retired many years ago, but I'm still having fun, and I'll stop when I don't think I can add any more value. I still think I have a fair amount of value.
That's a long time away. I appreciate not only your story and your journey, but everything you're doing. And I'm going to circle back with you probably in 6 months and have you tell us what's coming 6 months later.
I look forward to it, Gary.
And we'll do it again.
Great to be on with you, and thank you again for
Thank you, Wim.
Me.
Stay well. We'll be in touch.
Too.
Thank you,
Thank
bud.
you, Gary.
All right, Wim. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is part of the MAP Esports Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Please be sure to leave us a review and follow us on your favorite podcast player.